Yes, we're joined with the one and only Margaret Kimberly. Margaret Kimberly is a senior columnist and editor for Black Agenda Report and author of Prejudicial, Black America, and the Presidents. Margaret, thank you for joining me. How you doing this morning? You doing all
I'm
right?
doing well. Thank you so much. I'm
No,
now
thank you.
obsessing over my lipstick. I think I did something wrong. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You're perfectly fine. I brought you on a slightly early, so you might have been in the middle of getting everything straight before I brought you on. I'm sorry. But
That's
thank you for
okay.
joining me. I always appreciate you joining me. And my audience loves you on these
I
shows.
love to come on.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I brought you on for a few stories
Mhm.
to get back into some domestic politics. I
Okay.
was fascinated by, well, for one, do you want to say anything on the Syrian thing? And the reason,
Oh,
and I start on that just because there's a lot of celebration that is taking place. There's a lot of whitewashing of
mhm.
Jelani, who is effectively a terrorist that is as a $10 million bounty on his head from the US, not to mention the bounty from the UK. Basically, they want his life. And yet they are whitewashing him. CNN brought him on to whitewash him, to act like he's just a regular guy who
Mhm.
used to do a bit of head chopping in his youth, but it's now developed into, he thought that head chopping was wrong. Like the idea that you come from head chopping and then they're like, but no, he's a better person now. He's diversity friendly jihadist now. So, it'll be okay. That is outrageous to me that
Yes,
they're
it
even
is.
pushing that line. Give me your
Well,
take on all of this.
well, first of all, I'm still in shock.
You
Ever
and I
since
both.
Saturday, this is now Tuesday, I could not believe that the state fell so quickly. And this is a catastrophe. It's a catastrophe for the world. And let me explain why. The US and Israel now control that entire region. This idea of a greater Israel is now a reality. Excuse me, Palestinian people are now doomed. I hate to be so negative, but it's more important than ever for us to keep talking about the genocide. Amnesty International finally, after a year of genocide, finally announced publicly that this was what everybody else knew. ICC finally issuing arrest warrants. And but the fall of the Syrian state, of a secular Arab state that stood in the way to some degree against US imperial designs, is a disaster. It means that the US has won. Um, it seems that the US is the only country that's really serious about using its power. They struck at the moment to, first of all, to harm Russia. Russia's bogged down in Ukraine, and they guessed correctly it was going to be difficult for them to come to Syria's aid. Um, Turkey, of course, Erdogan is a two-faced backstabber. Actually, stabs you in the front. Everybody knew what he was up to in wanting to grab a chunk of Syria and in
Right.
backing these jihadists. Arab states are either bought off by the US, they're US client states like Egypt and Jordan, or the Gulf monarchies, Saudi Arabia, etc. So that's the Arab world, either occupied by the US or US forces or client states. There's no international Arab power, and it's a great tragedy. And it's terrible. It is not a good thing for the US to run everything. The US
No.
needs to have counter forces in the world, and they're weak. China is an economic power, but not a military power. Russia is a military power, but can't fight on two fronts.
Mhm.
So this is really terrible. And anybody who is applauding the fall of the Syrian state is not to be trusted. If you're an anti imperialist, you cannot be happy now. The only way people talk about Assad being a dictator and being brutal and all, some of which may be true, some of which is true, but a lot of it's a lie. Um, the only way to bring real democracy to Syria was to keep Assad in place, because Russia had agreements that Assad would negotiate with his opposition. that there would be a new civil society in that country. Now the country's torn apart, but between Israel and jihadists and Turkey, and you're not seeing anything better with this new state that's been decapitated and now has been torn apart. So I'm looking askance at anybody who is cheering what's happening in Syria right now.
Yeah, agreed. All of those beaches with people, women in bikinis, men walking around with no shirt, all of that's over with. Any notion of religion, minorities, I would imagine they are utterly terrified right now. My my producer has family. He's Syrian Lebanese by heritage. He has family that was stuck in Aleppo when it fell. And he said they're terrified. I've had guests who wouldn't even come on the show because they're scared of what may happen based on what they say to family members that are in that area. And so, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like when I look at Libya, when I look at Iraq, all of those places were utter disasters, and they were understood to be disasters. And then for this, they're like, yeah, a head chopper taking over Syria, that should go perfectly fine. No issue here at all.
Well,
Israel,
I tell you, the power of propaganda. You were talking about this jihadist who, with the help of corporate media, who work hand in hand with the state, they tell him to take his turban off. I'm probably wrong in calling it a turban. You know, I think he trimmed his beard a little, took the head wrap off of his head, and that told you the story. The U.S. did not give up taking over Syria. They call them rebels. So the guy who was a jihadist is now just a moderate leader. Using words like rebel is something that confuses a lot of people. So BBC tweeted something about, how he remade his image. He remade his image with the help of the BBC and others like it. So this is a terrible, terrible tragedy. And there has to have been a lot of treachery for the Syrian army basically to have just given up and not even to fight. We'll get the details, I'm sure, in the coming days, but there's nothing good about this. We need a multipolar world, and that is not happening now. The U.S. is more powerful now, and that is never, ever a good thing. The U.S. never has clean hands, doesn't care about dictatorships. Nope. And this is horrible. This is
that's the irony of it, right? Like it's like Assad is a brutal dictator. Saudi Arabia is a dictatorship. Qatar is a dictatorship. All of those countries are dictatorships. We're friends with all of them. We're friends with all of them.
Right.
Just outrageous. And now they're like, Assad needs to see justice. Okay, Netanyahu literally has an ICC arrest warrant. Gallant has an ICC arrest warrant. Gallant just came to New York without any issue at all. Coming to New York, despite the fact that the man is a war criminal. It's astonishing. It is utterly astonishing. No, I agree with you wholeheartedly on this. I am still digesting it. I was shocked by the whole thing, frankly. I don't know anybody who predicted this at all.
No, the Russians were surprised. I would love to, wouldn't we all love to be flies on the wall and know exactly how this disaster happened and happened so quickly?
I would love to be a fly on the wall in Doha in that conversation because Lavrov came out pissed off big time.
Yeah, well, Erdogan can't be trusted, and Russia is trusting him. That's one thing that's quite clear.
Yeah, I get the sense that he is, he's one of those factors that you can't trust, but you're stuck with dealing with.
Yeah, he's the president of Turkey. Turkey's a power in the region. They can't ignore him, but he plays both sides. Turkey is a member of NATO still. So he cuts deals for himself. He is one of those who picked Syria apart, sent millions of people out of the country, and then made European countries pay him to keep refugees from going into their nations. This guy is a wheeler dealer.
He blackmailed them. That's a huge part. He was like, "You want more of these coming into your country? Give me money."
That's right. Money.
Yep. Israel has taken a huge swath of territory of Syria at this point. They're effectively carving it up. They're 20 kilometers from Damascus. There's talk in Israel that they should take more, basically go all the way to Damascus. What's going to stop them? They're blowing up any and everything that had to do with Syrian power in this case in
Mhm.
order to prevent the jihadists from getting their hands on it. So, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly on this. This is a dark day for anybody that
Yes.
cares about any notion of sovereignty for any of these states. Um, I want to move for a moment to blame game, the blame game. Because right now it seems the Politico was running this article that Democrats are in this kind of angry stage that, they're going from blame to anger to sadness, et cetera, et cetera. But one of Kamala Harris's campaign managers said something that I think is utterly outrageous. And I don't doubt that it's true. Malik and I had this conversation when it was happening. And as I pointed out to Malik, I was like, yeah, you're right, but that can't be the end all be all. I want to get your take on this clip. This is Kamala Harris's campaign manager. And he is arguing that Black women would have been very upset if they would have basically had a primary. Meaning, if they would have had a primary process, it would have angered Black women, who was a major demographic of the Democratic Party. And as I was pointing out, dude, Black women would have gotten over it. They would prefer that you win as opposed to you running with Kamala Harris and losing. I want to get your take on this clip. This is for campaign manager.
We had 107 days, and I know people don't like that time frame, that number, but to open up a Democratic primary, you would have had Black women, who were the strongest voting bloc for Kamala Harris, be highly upset if it was not Kamala Harris. You would have had someone starting with zero infrastructure. I hear your concern, and I'm not saying that primaries are not important and open primaries are important. We had 107 days.
Is that true? I mean, I guess from my point of view, it's like, yeah, no, I accept they would have been upset. Is that really the end all be all? And wouldn't it have been preferable to win as opposed to, we're going to lose with keeping, I don't know, solidarity with Black women? That just seems outrageous to me. Give me your thoughts on this.
It is outrageous. There's so many, what's the saying? Success has 1,000 fathers, failure is an orphan. So nobody will own up to what really happened in this debacle. There are two versions of events. One is there was going to be an open primary or an open convention, some way of choosing the candidate. And Nancy Pelosi and Obama were behind it. And Biden double-crossed everybody because he was so angry about being kicked out. And he endorsed Kamala Harris and undercut that entire process. So that's one version of events. So then we have this other version of events that, well, it would have looked bad to pass over the vice president. And so you had to pick her, and Black people, Black women especially, would have been angry. Well, I don't buy it. I don't buy that at all. First of all, and I resent them using Black women in order to justify this debacle that brought Donald Trump back to the White House and Republican control of Congress. Black people, I think you are correct. It's unfortunate, but Black people will not only 90% of us support the Democrat, but we'll get over it. It's like, especially if you tell us in order to defeat Trump, we're going to have an open primary and make sure we have the strongest candidate. There would have been some prominent people who questioned that, but I never felt that Kamala Harris had that kind of connection with the Black community and with Black women that people would have been so upset that they didn't vote for her. So I think it's an excuse. Now, they may have heard from some people who said, and the Black misleaders, as we call them, who said you have to choose her. But I'm not buying it, though. I'm just not. Now there's another version of events that Biden was set up. They knew he couldn't do it, and
Biden was set up.
They had this debate in June, which was odd. It was so early.
Right, they had it early.
Usually after Labor Day, and that he face planted in the debate. And the idea was to, have him fail and then put Kamala Harris in there. There's so many different things. I have to say again, I was shocked that they stuck with Biden. I figured by 2003 they would have moved against him, that he would have said, actually, what did he call himself? A transitional figure. As I
Transitional
said, I'm a
candidate.
transitional figure. I'm not running for re-election. But they stuck with him. And there were people who were very public, like David Axelrod, as his approval ratings were so low. And it was, he said, I remember on Twitter, it was about a year before Election Day, last November, that he questioned the wisdom of Biden being the nominee. So clearly there was a struggle in the party about what to do about Biden. So which of these things is true? Maybe there's an element of truth in all of them. I don't really know, but I know the Democratic Party rank and file. I'm not a Democrat anymore, but the Democratic Party rank and file need to be very, very angry that their party failed them so badly. And Black women are yes, it's true, are the people they depend upon to win. Black people in general depend upon to win, but we're not treated like it any other time. We always come in at the end of the process. They make some decision or rig it for a certain person, and then Black people are supposed to show up on Election Day and pull their irons out of a fire. I would like to see Black people start to question their relationship with the Democratic Party and start talking about how to change it, because this is clearly not working at all.
Do you get the sense that they are angry with the party? I don't get that sense. I get the sense that they are shocked and confused that she lost.
It's unfortunate that people are not angry with the Democratic Party. They should be. They're mad at, they're mad at people who didn't vote. They're mad at Latinos and, people saying these horrible things. I hope you all get deported. And it's, people mad at Palestinians, mad at Arabs for not voting for the party that's killing their people. But it shows the lack of political maturity, frankly, that so many people have, that politics has been turned into this virtue signaling. Our party is the good party, and that's all we need to know. And everybody should vote for the Democrat because we're voting for the Democrat, and ignoring the reality of other people, ignoring the fact that Black people are not players at all, just expected to turn up. So there's not enough anger. There should be, but I'm a little dispirited because I don't see the reaction that frankly people need to have at this point.
I agree with you. I don't. It seems like they are fundamentally missing why they alienate the rest of the population. My doctor, her and I got into this big back and forth, and she's like, she just doesn't get it. Like for her, it's like, well, Kamala Harris is good. She's great. And people just don't vote for her because she's a woman, and that's the end all be all. And if you look at The View, same thing. That's the argument that Whoopi Goldberg comes out with. Even Hunter Biden, when they pardoned Hunter Biden, their argument boiled down to, well, I don't even consider it a lie. I think it's perfectly fine for him to do this. And it's like, okay, dude, even if you accept that it's fine for him to pardon his kid, let's be honest, it is a lie. It was a cynical political move in order to get from point A to point B, where they wanted to, A, say, we're the party that believes in law and order, where Donald Trump is not. And now Joe Biden is arguing, well, I believe in the law, but I believe that this is politically motivated, that this is politically biased.
The other thing that I find interesting is that no one's taking Biden on for not pardoning anybody else. He's been very stingy with his pardons. This was an opportunity for him to, the optics would have been better, if nothing else, if he pardoned his son and pardoned 10 other people who had been locked up for years in this so-called anti-drug crusade that he drove. This is the guy bragging about the crime bill that put so many people in prison, who said, and if you have a little bit of crack cocaine, you're going to do 5 years. Now, I realize the charges against Hunter Biden had nothing to do with drug possession, but that's in the minds of people. It's like, well, your crackhead son didn't do any time. Come on. But the fact that they didn't even see the reason, see a reason to make this look better. Okay, well, pardon Hunter, but I got to pardon some other people too. They're very draconian sentences for in the U.S. in general. He could have pardoned someone in the federal process whose innocence, guilt was in question. I mean, come on, he has the apparatus at his disposal, and to say, I got to pardon other people. You got to give me some more names. But that clearly was not an issue for him at all, nor was it an issue for anybody else in the Democratic Party. Also, this pardon, it goes back to 2014. The charges against Hunter Biden are from 2016 to 2019. Why 2014? Well, that's the Ukraine, his involvement in Ukraine. His son, his dumb son, who was paid $50,000 to do nothing except be named Biden. So he's and as some have said, maybe he's pardoning himself. Maybe there is some sort of conflict of interest. I mean, as I believe, a conflict of interest by its very nature, but some kind of connection that he had with his son doing this work for a Ukrainian energy company. So it all just stinks to sum up.
Yeah, he goes back 11 years. Like, he literally goes back to the beginning of the Ukraine war. Like, well, I call it the beginning of the Ukraine war. You overthrow the government of a country, and then all hell breaks loose after you overthrow it. And yeah, it's very suspicious that he goes back 11 years to that specific date. And it sounds like it's not just about Hunter Biden. It sounds like it might be about him. I mean, hell, one of the cases on the Black Agenda Report, you guys were talking about the Uhuru case, and how the sentencing is coming up December 25th? 16th, thank you. December 16th. That case is outrageous because they are effectively criminalizing what this person represents, meaning First Amendment rights at this point, and now being criminalized. His own political point of view is being criminalized. And they're acting as if, because his point of view was antagonistic to the US, that somehow he was working with the Russians. All of this is outrageous in and of itself. I mean, look, from my point of view, social media stuff going around the First Amendment in order to push social media companies to get rid of content that they didn't particularly like, or in this case, going after outright prosecutions of this group. Go into this a little bit, just to give the public a little heads up about how outrageous this was, that they went after this group. I believe they were in Florida, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, Omali Yeshitela and two other co-defendants known as the Uhuru Three were indicted. They were accused of being agents of Russia. Now, prosecutors always do this. They hit you with a lot of charges to increase the likelihood that you'll be convicted of something. So they were charged with being foreign agents of Russia, and also charged with conspiracy. Now, the jury acquitted them of the charge of being agents of Russia, but convicted them of conspiracy, which is, it doesn't make sense. So you're saying they weren't agents, but they were conspiring to do something that never happened. It's so Omali. I spoke to Omali last week on Black Agenda Radio, and it's thought crime. That's all it is. I consider it prosecutorial misconduct, frankly, in my opinion, to cook up charges just to make sure you get somebody for something. And so basically what they're saying is, by opposing U.S. foreign policy about Ukraine, about any number of things, that makes you suspect, makes you an agent of another country. And if we can't prove it, we'll make sure we get you for something and say that you conspired to do this. So we will see on Monday the 16th, their sentencing in Tampa, Florida takes place.
What kind of charges are they
terrible.
facing?
This is a warning to all of us who are activists, who are journalists. We see what happened with your former platform, which the U.S. sanctioned Sputnik, sanctioned RT. You can't be on these channels. You can't, if you want to listen to them, they've deprived us of the right to hear what we want to hear. And but then they talk about other countries being dictatorships or not being democratic. And this, by the way, and this is happening in the Democratic Party, not Trump, but a Democrat who's supposed to be so much better. And today is December 10th is Human Rights Day, and our human rights are violated by a government that is insisting on having its way around the world and insisting on silencing dissent. So nobody wants to end up in federal court like the Uhuru 3. So it stifles speech. Entire platforms are removed. African Stream was taken off YouTube. Yes, Google just removed them because Antony Blinken claimed they were agents of Russia. So that's a human right, to be able to speak, to be able to get information as you want. And once again, we see that the U.S. Is a big human rights violator in so many different ways.
What are they risking in regards to the sentencing that's coming up?
I mean, no one knows. They could get up to, I believe it's 5 years in prison, but of course judges have leeway. It could be, I would hope that it's probation, or, O'Malley is in his 80s. I would hope that would be taken into account. I would hope the fact that they were acquitted of the more serious charge is taken into account. But, we don't know if this is a hanging judge. We don't know if this is a judge who would use some tender justice with mercy or have some common sense. We have no idea. But we will find out on Monday. So I'm glad you mentioned them. I feel like they have not gotten enough attention because this is everybody's fate. They can, if you've been to a certain country or you talk to people from that country or have any connection with them, that you can be accused of being an agent for a foreign government, and you can end up in a courtroom or potentially behind bars.
That is outrageous. I remember when this case first came down, and there is something chilling about what they seem to be doing. Why do you think they're taking this aggressive action like this? Like, meaning it wasn't this way prior. What do you think changed where they gotten so much more aggressive on this idea of going after contrary opinions to the U.S. government?
I think it's that as the U.S. Escalates wars, escalates its effort to have hegemony over the entire world, they see it as important to stamp out any dissent. And of course, Black people, we're always the first ones, the first victims of these efforts to silence anyone who wants to promote a different, express a different narrative, who wants to express a political difference. If you look at Paul Robeson and others who had their passports revoked in the 1950s, people like Claudia Jones who were deported, it's always Black people who go first. So I think it's the inherent racism of the system, of the legal system, and it's combined with this new determination for the U.S. to be the world's hegemon. And it comes down to people being persecuted and prosecuted.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I agree with you on that. They feel pressure. They feel like this notion of hegemony is kind of ending, and they're doing any and everything in their power to maintain that level of control, especially on media. Margaret, thank you for this. I always appreciate these conversations. Margaret Kimberly, she's a senior columnist and editor for Black Agenda Report and author of Prejudential, Black America and the Presidents. You can find Margaret at Freedom Ride blog. Is there anywhere else that people can find you, just in case?
On X, Twitter, Freedom Ride blog. You can read me every week in blackagendareport.com. And I'm also on Blue Sky as Margaret Kimberly, and I have a Patreon, Margaret Kimberly.
Very cool. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. You have a good one.
You too.